So last week we got into this message about the profile, and what I was doing was using the first part of how it works in the big book to talk about the profile of someone that I was calling last week the Mr. or Miss cannot, will not, cannot get sober because will not get honest, and will not release my sense of power to the God that I need to bring into my life to bring healing, healing from what's going on with me. And so we talked about that profile a lot last week. If you missed that message, you might want to go to recoverycokesbury.com, look at that message. This is kind of like part 2 of it. I didn't know we were going to have a part 2, and here we are, we're going to have one. And so I want to get into a conversation about this profile that I was talking about last week, extending into what does it mean when we decide that we're going to keep secrets? For most of us, our secrets got us sick, and our secrets are going to keep us sick, and there is no other beneficiary of us deciding that we're going to keep a secret ultimately except for the enemy. I've never seen something good come out of somebody keeping a secret that is really creating destruction in them. So secrets are what I want to talk about tonight. I'm going to take you back to a section of the this how it works piece. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot, will not, completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually women and men who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. That's really where it starts. So you got the cannot, will not profile now showing up with this dilemma about keeping a secret, and the will not, I think, is more what I want to talk about tonight. There is a cannot to this too. The cannot is, for most of us if you were raised in the South, especially if you were raised in church, generally we have done people no favors when it comes to this conversation about secrets. Because most churches have if you were to say to people, if I were to say, this Sunday, everybody that comes to Cokesbury, all you really got to bring is your number one secret. I could honestly pretty much tell you that there would be enough people here in this building that could hear that from somebody where this would be a safe place. Are you following that? And where we could actually pay attention to the pain level that invitation would bring. I mean, we say it freely here, but it doesn't always like that. But if I could magically, flip a switch and get people to go, okay, I'll bring my number one this Sunday, God would actually be here and he would actually do something tremendous with that outpouring of pain and truth, right? He would do something tremendous here. And he would do it because Jesus would fill this room. Hearts would be open, truth would be told, and people would begin to have an opportunity for what the cross buys all of us, which is freedom. But the cannot of that is, I grew up in a good Christian family. I grew up in a home of a mom and a dad, or sort of a mom and a dad. And what I learned is you never tell the secrets of the family, right? You don't do it. You don't share that. You keep that. You honor that secret of the family at all costs. Because it's better to hold it and to suffer than it is to share it and, see what kind of fallout there's going to be, especially, amongst the family. And most of us have seen the outcome of sharing of a secret go bad in somebody's life. You finally see somebody, get to a point of being willing to talk about something devastating in their life. So they share that with their family maybe, and their family doesn't want to hear that. And the family, they give the pushback, or they push that person away, or maybe they push that person out of family life for a while because I can't believe you said that about Uncle Frank, or I can't believe you said that about me, or I can't believe you actually shared the fact that happened, and you're not really sure anyway. And there's going to be lots of times when a deep, deep secret comes out in a family, right? There's going to be what? There's going to be rationalization. And see, we've all been privy to that. If you live long enough, you've seen that happen to somebody, haven't you? You've seen somebody share something, and it just, from the outcome, not the truth telling, but the outcome just didn't go well. And you go, but Jesus, Jesus goes, you got to know the truth, and when you know the truth will set you free. I have come that you can know the truth. Jesus says all that. It's like, well, maybe Jesus didn't, maybe that wasn't the way it was in his family. It begins to make you second guess whether that's a good idea. And maybe it's true that we should just keep it to ourselves. Maybe I cannot share that, or maybe I will not. And yet, you got the deal in the big book, and it's basically going part of this profile that really that honestly ends every time left unattended in death. Could be spiritual death, emotional death, eventually physical death. But left unattended, it's going to create tremendous wreckage. This profile creates tremendous wreckage. If this is what is going on with you, I'm deliberately begging you to take seriously what I was talking about last week and what I'm talking about tonight, because I know you're going to get sicker if you keep living out of this profile. The will not talk about my pain, the will not talk about my secrets, the will not talk about the trauma in my life will make me sicker. It'll be the principal reason. It'll be every time the principal reason that I relapse. Amen? It'll be the principal reason that I relapse. I'm not going to relapse because I went 2.5 years, I went 5 years, I went 8 years clean. And then I woke up one day and I was like, I really got to have a beer. I really got to get high today. It's like, that isn't the way it is. It really, at that point, isn't the chemical stuff. It's really the heart stuff. It's really the pain that's in here. It's really the secret that's in here. It's really the abuse that's in here. It's really the trauma that's in here. We are headlong at recovery here in dealing with trauma. You can tell, right? We have regular class now about trauma and trauma recovery. We have availability of help for trauma. Why? Because we know that this cannot, will not profile gets you dead. Not only does it not get you sober, but it gets you dead. It wrecks your relationships with other people. It wrecks your family relationships. It wrecks your stuff with your kids. It wrecks you. And there's gotta be in church somewhere, hopefully it's here, an actual place where someone can go. We can actually talk about these secrets, and we're gonna be good. It's going to be a positive thing that we do it. We can actually talk about trauma. We can talk about sexual abuse. We can talk about being molested. We can talk about being beaten. We can talk about being abandoned. We can talk about what all that did to us. We can talk about all those kinds of things that have gone on in our lives that we've decided are better left unsaid. The problem is, it is not true that we can keep our secrets and nothing happens. It is very true that our secrets keep us. It's true that our secrets hold us absolutely hostage. People, so you've got this marriage, right? And you're married for a while, and you've gone through if you first get into a marriage, there's what I'm going to call like the function building part of a marriage. So you get married to somebody and you have children, right? And you buy a house and you get better jobs. You try to get a decent car and you get your kids in school, and you kind of got all that going on. So you've done all the official functions of what a marriage is supposed to do, right? And then you get through that first part of that, maybe you have another kid, and then all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, you've been married 10 years or 11 years, and your marriage is going to crap. And you can't figure out why. Well, because now your kids are at an old enough age where they're really kind of like hanging out with themselves, right? I mean, they need you, but they don't need you in a physical way the way they needed you when they were 4. They actually need you more than they think they do, but you know how that goes, right? And they're not around as much. You know, they're with friends, they're wherever. And here are the two of you as a married couple. And you're like, this is bizarre. I mean, like, we're here by ourselves. We're not really what to do with ourselves. It's been like, I kind of remember this vaguely when we were dating, but like, that was so long ago. It's like a very odd experience. Here we are at the house together. It's just us. And we're not sure why we feel like we're drifting. Well, we're drifting because there's a problem, there's a barrier to legitimate intimacy, to growing stronger together, to being more open together, to learning from each other. What is that from? That is from these secrets that I'm talking about. That is from stuff like trauma that I'm talking about. And most of us have been raised and led to believe that it's better to keep stuff like that is in our world, shameful and embarrassing and difficult to talk about, and maybe we feel responsible for it, we feel guilty, we feel ashamed. Better to leave it unsaid. It's like, I want you to look at stories in the Bible where God goes right at people that have big league secrets, and he does not let them go. You know, the other week I was talking about somebody challenged this, but I was like, I think that one of the early Bible sex addicts was David. So this lady writes me the next day, how can you David was a man after God's own heart. How can you say that David was a sex addict? That's just unbelievable. I'm like, beyond what you heard in Sunday school, have you ever read anything about David? Here are 17 things, here's some chapters to read about David. 2 days later, she emails me back. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. I'm like, right, because you have this view of David that is that's not even what God is saying about David. God was the one that put it in there. God has stories about all the stuff we're talking about in this room, in the Bible, all the time. Secret telling is one of them. He is not a fan because he knows it gets people dead. And you hear the backstory, well, this happened to this guy, and then he kept doing this, and finally God confronts him and goes, this is your problem. This is what you've been walking around with. I know it, you know it, but you're not telling me. That's our fascination with, one of my questions tonight is going to be a big one, you know, like in terms of what is this cannot about? My question is this: do you guys think that keeping a secret from God, and it's just this is like a bizarre conversation because like, number one, can you actually keep a secret from God? I mean, like, is that possible? But like spiritual nitwits, we walk around and go, well, you know, I haven't shared that with God yet. It's like, well, God's still loving you. He hasn't put a ban on your house. You know, he hasn't like sunk your house in a sinkhole or anything bizarre. It must be that God is aware of what has happened to you. And here's a news flash for you. I'm pretty sure it's happened to somebody before you. I think it has. And I think God was there. And I think when that happened to somebody before you, God was suffering with them. He wasn't putting his hand out going, what a shame. He was there holding that person. If that isn't your view of God, you got to go and start over with your view of God and always begin with this cross. Always begin to understand God the way you know Jesus. Don't go on some tangent trying to get to know God going, well, you know, God, some guys told me the other day, don't you think, Mark, that God is very elusive? I'm like, do I think God is elusive? No, he wrote a whole book about himself. Secondly, he said, if you want to get to know me, get to know my son. Get to know my son. He's fully available, lived on this planet just like you did, lived the experiences you did, had relationships like you, frustrations like you, despair like you, difficulty like you, pain like you, suffering like you. Get to know Jesus. So you got all that going on with God, right? Except, see, most of us don't get to know God based on Jesus, and so we end up being afraid of what God might think. If we told him, when I was 7, I was sexually abused. When I was 16, I was raped. It's like, you can keep that secret, but the fact is that secret is keeping you hostage. That secret is creating wreckage in you, and now you are repeating that trauma in your life over and over and over and over again every single day. And it's taking piece after piece after piece after piece out of you. And that's why we relapse. And that's why we can't seem to stay sober. After a while, it's really not because of the physical craving, it's because of the heart emptiness. It's because of the heart craving. It says, this is awful what I'm going through. This is a horrible feeling. I feel horrible about myself. I've got to have some way to deal with that. I'll get high. Is it true that it is actually arrogant of us to keep a secret from God? Is that true? Is it true that God has shown up in a place like this, that God has shown up in AA, that God has shown up in NA, Al-Anon, ACOA? Is it true that God has shown up in therapist's office? Is it true that God has moved into all those places, doctors, nurses, people at hospitals, people that work? Is it true that God is moving around you, trying to find a way for you to get you to not let your secret have control of you? You might not be sharing your secret, but your secret is sharing you. Amen? You might be saying anything about your secret, but your secret is saying volumes about you tonight. And I don't know what that secret is. I don't know. But I do know that what I'm talking about fits this profile of complete destruction of the soul. Because eventually an untold secret that you're ashamed enough of is going to separate you from God, which is exactly what the enemy wants to have happen. Exactly. You're like, look, I just don't know. I just don't know that I feel so close to God. It's like, of course you don't, because you don't believe that if you presented yourself to God and you stood in front of God and you're like, God, this is my whole life. This is going to take several hours for me to tell you my whole life. It's why when we talk about the 4th step and the 5th step, we go, look, the problem isn't the 4th step. The problem isn't telling somebody that isn't writing down the truth in your life. The problem isn't telling somebody else. The problem is you still don't believe. If you're just standing in front of God and it's you and God, and you're going to go, God, I'm going to share with you all the junk in my life, that God will still love you. And that is the problem with the 4th step. The problem with the 4th step is the 1st step. The problem with the 4th step is the 2nd step. The problem with the 4th step is the 3rd step. Because if you can't do a 1st step, and you can't do a 2nd step, and you can't turn your life and your will over to God, and you don't realize that whatever you put in front of God, He's going to love you, you're going to be on the run. And you're going to get sicker. And so it's got to be true that me deciding that I'm going to tell God the way that God is going to feel about me, and I'm going to tell God the way that God is going to love me, and I'm going to explain to God what an acceptable Mark Beebe is that I would offer to God, and I'm going to tell God when I'm good and ready to be with Him. That's arrogance. It looks really altruistic. It's like, no, like I'm sparing God this filthy stuff in my life. I'm sparing my friend. I'm sparing my sponsor. I'm sparing somebody in treatment. I'm saving somebody from this gross part of me. I'm doing them a favor. It's like, no, you're not. You're only doing the enemy a favor. You're only doing the enemy a favor. And you're deciding for God how God is going to love you, and you're deciding for God what God's limits are with His love for you, and you're deciding for God what about you is acceptable, and you're deciding for God the depth of grace you are. And that is spiritual arrogance. And that's what's wrong with this profile of keeping secrets. Don't be afraid of those who threaten you. For the time is coming when everything that is covered, Jesus is saying, is going to be revealed, opened up. And all that is secret will be made known to all. What I tell you now, in the darkness, shout abroad when daybreak comes. You know what daybreak was for all of us, whether you're a Christian or not? Daybreak was Easter Sunday. Daybreak, permanent daylight, was when the resurrection happened. Because once the resurrection happened, Jesus says two very important things. Number one, there are no hopeless people. Even death, just like that song Terry was singing, there are no hopeless people. Even death and the grave cannot and will not hold us. And second of all, there are no people that are unlovable. There are no people that are unlovable. There is nothing that you could share with God or somebody who is in love with God that will cause them to look away from you as if you're grotesque. And that's the way that if you're a guy, that's the way that getting molested feels. If you're a woman, that's the way that getting raped feels, grotesque. And you want to try to find some way to take responsibility for that, or a parent leaving you, or one of a million other traumas that have happened, somebody dying, it's a million other things. And we want to decide that trauma needs to be our fault because then somehow we can manage it, which takes us back to our problem with step one. But see, the light is here. The light is evidence based on the resurrection of Jesus. There's not going to be more darkness once you have a resurrection. Why is that? Because while you were waiting around from Good Friday to Easter Sunday, and while you were picking out, it's the only time I ever see people at Cokesbury get dressed up is Easter Sunday. It always flips me out. Like I pick out my most ratty t-shirt, and I wear shorts and all this junk because I'm like, I'm going to defend how we really are as a church, right? But people come in here in hats and like new dresses and all this. I'm like, cool, but I don't really get it. But see, like the thing about it is, do they realize what they're getting dressed up for? Do they realize that on that day, Jesus rose from the dead, and while they were out there on Saturday going to TJ Maxx or wherever, trying to get that hat that looks a little weird anyway, probably, while they were trying to buy that hat, Jesus was in hell fighting it out for your heart, and was in hell battling the enemy for the opportunity to hear your secrets and to hear your pain, and was in hell telling the devil, you will not take her, and you will not have him, and I will fight for them for the rest of my life, which is eternity. And every day, all the time, Jesus is in this room, in your life, in your car, at your house, at your job, fighting for you to realize how much he loves you and how much of a difference it would make if you just would put your heart out in the light. If not to him, then to somebody, because if it's somebody else that he brought into your life, it'll be to him. What I whisper in your ear, shout from the housetops for all to hear. Like, who tonight do you think is the biggest threat to you? It's you. You are the biggest threat to you. It is not your trauma. It is not your past. It is not your pain. It is not who molested you. It is not the abortion that you had. It's you. It's you. Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body, judge you. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. But does God do that? No. What is God's answer to your brokenness? The cross of Jesus. Jesus is saying to you, do you have pain in your life? I'll take that. I'll take that, I'll put that on my body. I'll take it off your body and I'll put it on my body. I'll take it out of your heart and I'll put it on my heart. I'm strong enough. I can take your junk. I can free you from it. You don't have to carry it around anymore. What is the price of the 2 sparrows? 1 copper coin, but not a single sparrow can fall to the ground without your Father knowing it. What do you think God will do with your secret if you offered it up for him tonight, to him? What if you stepped into this care room tonight and you said, I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow your mind? I mean, to anybody in the care room, it won't blow their mind. They'll be so grateful, though, that you're going to be free tonight. They'll be so grateful. And the shining cross of Jesus will be so powerful tonight if you'll just do that. Or do it tomorrow, or tell somebody you know that's in the program, or go see a therapist and share it with them, or come here and share it with one of us. What do you think God will do with your secret? He'll love you. What God is going to do with your secret is he's going to love you. This scripture in Matthew goes on, and the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So if you don't have hair on your head, you're out. No, if you don't, if you don't have hair on your head, God can remember where each hair was and can show you where they were. I made that part up. I don't know, but I think it's true. So don't be afraid. You are more valuable to God than a whole flock of sparrows. So cannot, will not is going to equal free not. They're such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living that demands rigorous honesty. Their chances, because of the absence of rigorous honesty, are less than average. What happens to me? Well, let's look at some of the stuff we talked about last week. How do I get to this profile? How do I decide that keeping this secret is what I got to do? Well, power is the only known for me, the only known source of security. The only way I know to be secure is power. It'll get you dead. Fear presents as independence. Because I'm afraid of something, I get to choose that I'm not going to do it. That'll get you dead. Man, I just don't know. I don't know about going to meetings. I don't know about going to treatment. I don't know about sharing what happened to me with somebody else. I don't know. I'm afraid. It's like, go ahead and be afraid. But you know what? Make a decision to be free. Make a decision to be afraid, but also make a decision to be free. That's got to be you. I will only give myself to myself as I know myself to be. That'll get you dead. I got to want sobriety. And I got to keep asking myself this question, like, what has Jesus done? Because this is what I know. Of the people in this program, in these rooms, that have died in the 9 now plus years that I've been here, every one of them had this profile that we've been talking about in the last 2 weeks. Jesus will fight for you. But you got to be willing to talk about those secrets and to talk about that pain and to talk about that trauma. There are a million ways to do it. Just do it. In Jesus' sweet name, thanks so much. We're going to open up the space in front of me for some prayer, and people will be available in the care rooms right out this door after we get done tonight to be able to spend some time with you. Don't give up. In Jesus' sweet name, amen.